Mckenzie, how's it going, bud?
Good, how about you, man?
Before the age of 30, smashing off the big five?
Yeah, not yet. Getting there. Getting close, but not there yet.
Yeah, so just before we get into it, you've definitely been a massive influence in the South African hunting industry. That's your contagious and infectious way of approaching the Dark Continent and South African hunting industry has definitely kept a lot of people interested and wanting to find out a little bit more of what you do. But before we get into that, why don't you introduce yourself and let's take it from there.
Yeah, my name is Mckenzie Sims. I live in Evanston, Wyoming right now. Um, Looking to relocate this year. Almost 28 years old, 28 years young, I guess is what a lot of people would call it. And I, there's not much more in life that I love than Africa and hunting Africa. That's pretty much all I think about. I read tons and tons of books on it. It is pretty much all I really care about, really.
So tell us where it all started. I mean, I'm sure you weren't even 20 years old before you shot your first buffalo. So tell us where the affection for hunting, number one, and number two, the love and passion you have for Africa. Where did that all start?
Yeah, I was in my teens when I shot my first buffalo, but so like my dad, he's from Arkansas and Alabama. That's where he grew up. So he hunted. My grandpa, his dad was like a big quail hunter, was a bird hunter. Wasn't really a big game hunter. They shot deer every once in a while, but they weren't like you know big game hunters. My dad would hunt deer, and then he moved out here to Wyoming during the 70s, during the oil boom, and that's what we do is oil and gas construction. That's what we do for a living. So he moved out here during that, and then obviously kind of you got to where he was hunting deer and elk because we live in Wyoming. You could buy a deer and elk tag over the counter. And so he would do that, and he would quit his job September 1st and go hunting all of September and October. And then if they would hire him back, he'd go back or he'd go find a new one because there was so much work around here. You could they were hiring people out of the culverts here. It was crazy. There were so many people living in this small town that didn't have enough housing for them. And then, so that was kind of the deal. And then him and my mom got married. And then in 1998, I think 2 years after I was born, he started his own business, his own oil and gas construction business. Um, and yeah, he was gone a lot. And the only time we really went and did anything, he didn't go to like sports and stuff with me. We would go hunting, like we'd go out deer and elk hunting for a week or something. And so we were at a log home show because they wanted to build a log house. And we were just walking around. And, I was 2006. I was like 10 years old, 10 years old. And you know how a kid at a house show is going to be. He's going to be bored. So I was just walking around. And sure enough, there's two South Africans sitting in their booth. And they just had their little hunting booth at this trade show. And I was like, what the hell? So I sat and talked to them for a while, and they were just passing time between like Dallas and SCI. They were just filling in gaps with other trade shows, and talked to them for I don't know a couple hours. And I wish I knew who they were too, because I'd love to go back and like just be like, thank you guys. But so like they talked to me, and I was like, well, how old do you have to be to hunt in Africa? Because here in Wyoming, you have to be 12 to hunt big game. And they're like, oh, you don't got to be a certain age. You just got to be safe with the rifle and can shoot. And I'm like, well, hell yeah, this is game on. So I told my parents what they said, and my dad, I think at first he was kind of like, yeah, whatever. He's like, well, if you can pay for the plane ticket, we'll take you. And I'm like, game on. So I would do like lemonade stands and stuff like that, which didn't make me any money. I did that, but what I did was a 4-H pig. I did 2 pigs every year for 4-H, and I'd be able to sell one at the junior livestock sale in August. So I had 2 pigs and whatever. And the cool thing about back then, when it was real busy around here, there was a lot of big companies. You had Shell or Chevron, BP, like you had companies like that around here in the oil and gas industry. And so there was a lot of work. So you could go politic a lot and get people to come bid on your stuff at the 4-H stuff. So you'd give free dinner tickets and stuff. And so what I did is I just went and gave out a bunch of free dinner tickets, invited people to come bid on my pig. And I was towards the end of the night on the sale, and by the time my pig was done, I'd gotten like $2,800 out of the thing. So I mean, that was more than enough for a plane ticket to Africa. Ran up and hugged the lady and looked at my head and said, "Let's book the trip." And so from there, our dentist here in town, he'd been to Africa 4 or 5 times, and I would spend hours in his dentist office because he had all of his heads in his dentist office. So it was pretty cool. And so we talked to him, and that's how we kind of got our first first safari going was then. We went in June of 2007 was that first trip. And I think my dad might have regretted it.
First African trip?
So it was the Eastern Cape. Eastern Cape.
And with any specific outfitters?
So I don't know. I don't think he's still in business anymore. It was Louis Ladigan with Melody Safaris out of Eastern London area.
Yeah.
Do you know Louis?
Yeah, Louis, he was around for some time. Held his own, put it that way. News travels in the industry, so we'll take it as it comes. But yeah, he had a great establishment back in the day. So what is it about Africa that keeps you coming back, number one? And number two, that you speak so passionately about it? I mean, I've been following you for some time now, and if there's anyone that's got a contagious feel about Africa and really revolutionizes what we've been trying to do as a hunting industry. So what back home, what is it that got you, man, Africa is the place to be? What is it that you enjoyed coming back time and time again?
I think it's just, the whole, it's everything about a safari, really. It's not even, I can't even pinpoint one thing because it's, you're talking to new people, you're learning different languages, you are seeing tons and tons of game, tons of just different stuff. The diversity of the experience is far beyond anything here in North America. You know what I mean? Even if you go on a guided elk hunt here in North America or a sheep hunt, you're going to only deal with, 2 to 3, maybe 4 people max in camp. You go on a safari, you can be dealing with anywhere between 5 and 20 people, depends on where you're at, that are going to be, employed by the operation, between trackers, skinners, cooks. It's just the whole gamut of safari is something that is unmatched, I think. And I think that was the whole thing. And I like doing different things because I grew up hunting deer and elk, and I love it, but it's like a competition around here almost more. It takes a lot of the fun away from it because we're trying to shoot big quality stuff. I think Africa takes the cake on it, and then I'd go Asia next. Asia is next because the amount of species you can hunt and see in Africa on a given day outweighs anything here in North America. Like here in Wyoming, today, literally, I was telling you I was trying to shoot this coyote. Couldn't get a coyote shot. Then there was a fox out here, but I won't shoot the fox because they're too pretty. Even though I've never shot one, they're too pretty, so we won't shoot them. But there's a coyote, so that's 2, which is odd that we've seen both those in our pasture today. But on a normal day hunting, you'll see a mule deer. You'll get lucky and see an elk. If you're in the right area, you might see an antelope, and that might be it for big game. Maybe a moose. You're going to see at max 5 big game species during a day if you're lucky. In Africa, even in the most remote places of Cameroon, Tanzania, you're going to see a lot of different stuff.
Mckenzie, once again, I mean, it's awesome. And it's something I've been trying to project from my side as well, is that, hunting is not just about coming out and killing an animal. It's about the experience. It's about the journey. It's about friendships, and it's about sharing passion. And, it really resonates. And I love that about how you've told the story from a hunting perspective, but you get to tell it on the other side of the pond.
So to me, it's just I watched a lot of TV when I was younger, and I would watch the Jim Shockeys and guys like that. And I'm like, damn, that looks cool. I want to go see that stuff. You know what I mean? And it's a lot I guess for me, it's, I did play sports when I was in younger, grade schools and stuff like that, but I never was a big sports guy. So I never chased sports, and I never did any of that stuff. So it's just kind of hunting fell into my thing. And even though I love North America, it's just I don't have a brain that's hardwired that there's more to life than just here. You know what I mean? So it's reading old books, seeing photos. I used to hate to read, so it was mainly just seeing photos and seeing videos, or going to trade shows and seeing all these mounts of these animals that it's what is all this? So then I started just diving in, trying to learn. And that's just kind of where it went from there. It's just, I think there's more to life, and it's more to it than just hunting, because it's the experience of it all, and the journey of everything. And it's just well, I want to see, so now it's more I'm not sure I want to hunt these species, but I also want to say, oh, I've been here. So I want to tick off the box and say I've been to every huntable Africa country, just to be able to, because that's cool when you can say that. Plus I want to be able to see and experience how it is and see the people. So I guess the long answer of that is just like the unknown of it, I guess, is what drove me more to liking it. It's just like, well, what's that going to be like?
Some safaris, your Instagram, YouTube channel, is that there as a separate entity now? Is it a business, or you're running it as a business? What can we see from it going forward, bringing and projecting the African safari adventure?
I've tried to do a lot of different stuff within the hunt industry. I used to have a TV show on the Outdoor Channel, done a bunch of different stuff. And to be able to do a lot of this stuff, I don't like. This is like bad to say, but I don't think you can make enough money in the hunting industry to be able to do a lot of the stuff and be able to live a life. So it's not really a business. Like the way I'm going about now is just I want to share it and I want to help other people. If there's any sort of monetary value or any sort of value that gets kicked back my way in between, that's a plus side. But for right now, I'm just like, you know what? I want to help other people because, I think because I went into things thinking, okay, I'll make, a little bit of money here, be able to do this. It makes it harder that way. And you put too much emphasis on the business side of it, like the money making side of it. So to me, it's just like, I want to build a platform and a brand for people to learn from, whether I make money off of that or not, because I'm going to go make money somewhere else, doing something else to actually fund it. That's kind of how I look at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, with your guys' politics back home, I never realized how bad your guys' politics has such a huge impact and effect on our hunting industry back here. So every time you guys have a downward spiral, it kind of affects the hunting industry, because our main clientele is from the northern hemispheres. So let's hope Trump 2024.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's crazy how like one thing that's not relevant to hunting can change a lot of the aspects of it.
So, I mean, been to South Africa and Africa like so many times. What have you got left? I mean, is there anything left for you to hunt?
Man. So I did a spreadsheet. I made a spreadsheet up on Tuesday, and I still have 103 species throughout Africa to hunt.
So, like mentioned, you shot your first buffalo in when you were just a teenager. Have you completed your big five, or have you still got to get it done?
I got the big five. I've done that. If I need two more to complete my second big five. I need another elephant and another lion, and that will finish a second big five for me. But man, I need like red diker, Cape gricebuck, Sharps gricebuck, Sunni, like color variations of things. Like there's still quite a handful of Southern Africa stuff, but then I need all the stuff from like Uganda. I need to go back to Cameroon to the forest again. I need to do the derby hunt, a savanna species. I need to do the western kudu and Chad, along with some of the other species up there as well. I need to go back and hunt different areas of Ethiopia. Never been to Zimbabwe, so I want to do that. Never been to Mozambique, so I want to do that. There's still stuff in Zambia I got to go back for, such as like the Sitatunga and then the Lechways. There's just a shit ton of Africa I still need to do, and I could do it all over again.
So I see the passion has led you down to the Eastern Cape, my home province, and I see you do a lot of hunting here with John X Safaris, which is great. What keeps you bringing back? I mean, do you enjoy the Eastern Cape that much?
So the Eastern Cape's really, it's just a beautiful, like the scenery is awesome. I do like how you can be on, like when we did the Orby, we were down literally on the ocean, like you can see the ocean. Like the Eastern Cape, it holds like a lot of, obviously there's there's obviously the color variations and the stuff like that that's been bred in South Africa, but I feel like it's when you're on the Eastern Cape, it's a more old school South Africa. Same with like KwaZulu-Natal, like some of the more kind of remote wild stuff of Southern Africa, because you get a lot of free range stuff throughout Eastern Cape as well, which is nice. And there's species that you can only find down there, like the Cape bushbuck and the Eastern Cape kudu.
So going back to your experiences and what you live for as far as the hunting goes, I mean, you have to tell me about the experience that you had with the gorillas, because that's been a lifelong dream of mine.
So the gorillas, the scariest part about the gorillas in Cameroon is like when you're driving down through the forest, it's like straight up thick trees on both sides, thick trees, brush, and you'll be driving on the road and all of a sudden this gorilla will come and it'll be like 10 yards from you, but you won't ever get to see it, and it would scare the shit out of you on the truck. Everyone, even the trackers, would be like, looking. And then there was a couple times we'd walk into the Salines and there'd be a gorilla there, and that was super cool. Some of the crazy stuff was like when we were calling dikers, because you're in the forest and you can't see 20 yards, and you're calling, but the chimpanzees would come running in. You wouldn't see them, but you would hear them. And my PH, Danny's like, whatever you do, dude, do not shoot a chimpanzee, because it's like, that's a big no-no. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, don't shoot a gorilla unless we have to, because it's like, but I mean, it could very easily happen. A chimpanzee could run you over, calling in a diker, or a gorilla could run it into you when you're tracking the bongo. Like, it's pretty wild just thinking, and then you got the snakes and shit that are there. And there's just so much there. It's just wild.
So, Mckenzie, with all your experiences and your knowledge that you've built up over the years, traveling different places in Africa, what has been the highlighting factor? In South Africa, well, I see it a lot of the time when it comes down to arguments on social media and stuff. People will just say, you know what, we donate the meat to the village, when, as well as what I do back in South Africa, that's not the case. So going back up north, what differences from a conservation point of view have you seen that the different countries have benefited from the hunting side of things?
Yeah, so I mean, prime example, like you said, like in most of South Africa, it's not like you're taking meat to a village. A lot of the meat does get donated, but you might be taking it to different places, and the hunters are not normally involved in that. We drop some off to a school with John X, but like, for the most part, you're not just taking a full buffalo to some random village and dropping it off in South Africa. But the big conservation part, like I'll kind of break it down throughout Africa. For me, like the big conservation part in South Africa is you guys have preserved like 50 million acres of what they call it. It wasn't like it was farmland, but it was not great farmland, so it was converted back into wildlife habitat. So you've converted so much wildlife habitat. You saved the black wildebeest, the southern orby, like I shot with John X. Like there's so many species that have been saved in South Africa and habitat that's been saved. And there's been so many jobs created. That's a big thing. Like look at how many jobs have been created within South Africa, just, between the dip and pack, the taxidermy stuff, the trackers, like all of it. It's amazing how many different jobs have been created. And then like when you go to like Zambia, so like when we were in Zambia, we'd shoot the buffalo, and we'd have it's like the rule. All the buffalo you can't keep any buffalo in camp. They have to be distributed between the different areas. So we shot a buffalo, we take it to one village, drop it off. Shot another buffalo, we take it to a different village, drop it off. And then we did the same thing when we shot an elephant in Namibia. We had to take it and have it dropped off. But it's kind of like a different aspect of it. Like, I think South Africa and Namibia have the best conservation model as far as it goes, of creating the value and saving the wildlife. And then in the other places, it's, the hunting areas is what's kept the wild stuff wild. Because without the hunting and the anti-poaching funds, that shit would have been, poached out, or there would have been livestock moved in, and then, habitat demolished because of livestock. And you see that everywhere. Like Ethiopia is a big one, the Mountain Yala. If it wasn't for Jason and Nasa Russos, protecting these areas and starting it out in the beginning, there'd be no Mountain Yala left by now, because and it's not the fact that people don't like the wildlife. It's like there's not the logic's not there because there's no value for them in some areas, and so they'll come in and they'll be doing like the coffee bean plantations and all that in Ethiopia, or they'll be moving, demolishing stuff for livestock, burning the brush for livestock every year, and it just destroys a lot of the natural habitat for the wildlife. It's not like I don't think Africans mean to do it. Like it's like, oh, we're just gonna erase the Cape Buffalo from the face of the earth. They're trying to do it because they're trying to survive a different way, And I think there's a big misconception when it comes to it. Like I'm reading a book right now. It's like a Game Animals of Africa, or Antelope of Africa, and I was like going through it, and it's talking about different species. And I love how they word this, and I'm being sarcastic when I say I love how they word it. They word it saying uncontrolled hunting. Uncontrolled hunting is not hunting, that's poaching. That's illegal hunting. Hunting is controlled. If you think about hunting is controlled. Poaching is not hunting to me. And most of the times, like the funny thing is, like a lot of people here in America will think, well, those people are just poaching animals so they can eat food themselves. No, most of the time that's not the case. They're poaching it to sell it to make money. So like in Zambia, when we would drop the buffalo off, it was only the women allowed to pick up the buffalo meat, because there's a high percentage chance that the husband or whatever, the man in the house, would grab the buffalo meat and would sell it on the way back home to buy booze or something else and wouldn't even be able to feed his kids. You know what I mean? Like it's crazy how that is.
So with that being said, and a lot of as corrupt as Africa can get, were there often times that you find yourself in a predicament where maybe you thought that, wait, hang on, yeah, my hunting dollar's not going to the exact places that I intended to go, or did you kind of have a broader perspective that saying, wait, hang on, I'm here, I'm going to enjoy this experience, and whatever may be. Although a lot of guys are out there to take chances.
I'm sure at some stage there's little things, there's always behind the back deals when it comes to government, especially when you get in those other countries like Tanzania, those places where you're dealing with a lot of government stuff. But I think the overall whole of things, I think it goes to a good cause, because you see a lot of the effects, like that's the thing compared to like someone writing a check to PETA for $20,000 and mailing that to them. They don't see where that goes. Where a guy comes hunting, writes a $20,000 check to you for a 10-day safari, such and such species. You see a lot of that effect because you see the people you employ. I see the areas that you have. Whether you're hunting your own place, and then we go to something like the Orby or Blue Diker. You see the different. You see where the money goes in that aspect, and then plus you see the people that get employed, the food that gets distributed in those areas. Like you get to see a more hands-on approach than anyone that's just talking on Instagram or writing a check to PETA. Like that's my funny thing is like anyone can be a keyboard warrior, but not very many of them will actually go put their money. And it like any amount of money helps. Like if someone wants to donate money to like SCI or any of these organizations, or say you have a project that you're wanting to do in one of your areas, build some boreholes or something like that, it's just like anyone that wants to write you a check is great. But until someone actually go put their feet on the ground, see what's happening, and actually put real money down, like I don't think they value it as much. That's a big thing. Like here in America, they talk like you see all this like right now. The wolf thing in Colorado is a huge topic, and I'll probably get some shit for this. But like you see so many people just beating the drum on social media, like the wolves are gonna take out the deer now. Everyone needs to help us out. It's like, well, who have you helped out in the past? Did you care about leopard importation? Have you cared about elephant importation? If you haven't cared about anything else, then I really don't think you deserve any help, because as hunters, we all get in these two little niche groups, and everyone categorizes ourselves like deer hunters, sheep hunters, turkey hunters, elk hunters. No, we're all hunters. That's how it needs to be. And so I think if you can't support everyone else, no one should just have to support you type of deal. That's just how I look at it, and whatever, because I think it's only fair if because that's the only way we're all going to be able to keep our love and passion, is if we all help each other out. Like you got to support, grizzly bear hunting. You got to support, mountain lion hunting in California at some point if they can ever get it back open. Like you got to be able to support everywhere to be able to make sure we all stay together, because what a lot of people here in North America don't realize is, Africa's super vulnerable. Asia, just because it's like the politics it's corrupt and it's different. So like what happens, like let's just say they shut down all hunting in Asia. Let's say they shut down all hunting in Africa. But then where do all the different anti-groups focus on? They focus on us here in North America. They don't realize that. And the UK and all that has the biggest anti-hunting. That's like the mecca of anti-hunters is like the UK and that stuff. So what happens when you get all those guys, they shut down all the hunting around the UK and England and Europe and all that. They get all that shut down. Well, they're not going to just say, cool, we succeeded here, we're just going to stop. No, they're going to all focus on North America. Same with us. If they shut down hunting here, they're going to focus on there or there. It's just we all got to work together, and that's kind of my big conception of the whole conservation model of it is I think we all need to realize we're all in it for the same thing. And obviously there's a few people that aren't. You know what I mean? There's a few bad eggs, but it's very minute compared to the whole scheme of things.
So with that being said, and the different conservation patterns, the way you've highlighted it has been perfect. I mean, it really just highlights how we've got to stick together as a hunting community. That's key. That's ultimately key for the broader, bigger picture. So, what would the discussion be, or the argument you would have for people saying that, you know, South Africa? I'm sure you've had experiences being down in the Eastern Cape, with South Africa having a lot of high fence properties to hunt from.
Yeah, so to me, to each their own. I respect everyone's thoughts and beliefs on whether they want to hunt high fence or not. But my thing is, without the high fence hunting in South Africa, there wouldn't be a lot of the same species around. You know what I mean? And so whether you hunt high fence or not, like let's look at I'm trying to think of a specific species. Like let's say the black wildebeest. If you're in an area, obviously they were saved pretty much by the high fence hunting. Their numbers have flourished because of it. Like let's look at it this way, or we can even look at look at a sable, for instance. Let's say there goes my light. One second, let me pick that up. Let's look at it this way. So the sable, because the sable, the species, the numbers of the species was really limited at one point in time, and throughout wild Africa, because you'd have the southern, you'd have Zambia, you would have a little bit in Namibia, so and so. But without high fence hunting, the prices of some of these animals would be stupid ridiculous. The value of them would be so high because of such in small demand. So I think to me the best way to look at it is it's all about the experience of it. And you can go to some of these high fenced areas in South Africa and they're huge, 30,000 acres, gigantic, right? And so to me it's if you go to a place and you don't ever see the fence, then is there really a fence there? You know what I mean? Without the fence there wouldn't probably be any animals there in true aspects of things, because we've talked about this. Africa has the highest growing population out of anywhere. You guys will overpopulate yourselves before anything else. And so it's just the high fence stuff has helped save so many different animals and keep so many places. It's wild because there's still the natural habitats there. It's wild. Sure, there's a fence around it. And plus, let's go look at it this way. If there's any dangerous game on a high fence place in South Africa, there's so many people, there's cities, you got areas. You would have elephants running amok. You'd have lions running amok in these areas, getting hit on the highways, causing more destructiveness, because there's a lot of good farming country too in South Africa. You'd have and then they'd have problem control shooting of the elephant, and then there's nothing brought. If you go shoot a problem control elephant, there's not any value brought to that animal, really. You know what I mean? Because there's not Americans coming over there spending money, or Europeans or whatever. So I guess it's a long-winded aspect. There's so many different ways to look at it. Is don't knock it till you go experience it, is my kind of thought. Now, again, we've talked about there's some bad eggs. There's a few bad eggs. There's a few really tiny places, guys doing stuff poorly. But if you go to a high fence place in South Africa with a quality outfitter and they do things right, you're not shooting from the truck all the time, you're not chasing game, they're actually caring about it. If you show up there and you experience it, I think it would change your mind on the high fence aspect of things, in my eyes.
Well, Mckenzie, the big one. You've just released your YouTube episode on it. Trade show season's around the corner. Well, it starts this weekend with Dallas Safari Club. I'm sure you've been to plenty of them. You're living proof. You've had a successful safari adventure with the trade shows. So tell me a little bit more about it. Tell me, if I'm playing devil's advocate over here, I can always tell you from my point of view, but from that side, what are some of the key factors that you would highlight for individuals coming out not only to their first trade show, but coming out to book their very first African safari or African adventure?
Yeah, so, it's a great point. Trade show season's here, and this is the best time for anyone to start planning their first or next safari, whether it's going to happen this year or years to come. My advice is, you can see somebody on Instagram, they can have a great Instagram, but they might not have the best outfitting business. My advice is go to the trade shows, sit down and talk to them, how we're talking right now. You know what I mean? Skype, Zoom, those are great ways of doing it too if you can schedule that with an outfitter. But the minute you can go and sit down and talk to them and say, oh, just kind of get to know them, and you kind of learn about their life, and you get a vibe to feel if you are going to be able to match. You know what I mean? Like, just talking to you, I can say, okay, me and Dylan can hunt together and have fun. Like, I can already see that. You know what I mean? That's the big thing about these trade shows is you can sit down and see if you guys are going to have fun. Because it's not fun if like, let's just say you book something over Instagram or over, email, and you show up and you don't mesh with your outfitter or your PH. Like, you're not going to have fun during that trip. So you want to be able to learn if you can mesh with them. So one, just go sit down and talk to them. And look, there's 100,000 different guys at these trade shows. There's going to be bad eggs in all of them, and that's just anything in life. There's going to be the guys that can smooth talk you, will, and deal you. And my next thing is, don't always go for the best deal, because the guys giving the best deal are usually the ones that are going to be the shady ones. That's how I look at it, because you can go, and I see it all the time, and like, I'm not bashing on anyone, but you go to these trade shows and you see a $5,000 Cape Buffalo hunt. Well, and the photos that they have on their banner, they're all soft boss bulls. But the typical person doesn't know that, which is, what I mean, to me, that's just not what you want to do. So it's just like things like that. Don't go for the best deal. Like, obviously, people work hard for the money. I understand that. But the same thing, like, whether you're buying a car, a house, whatever it is, you don't always buy it. Logic tells you don't buy the best deal, because sometimes the deal is too good to be true. Kind of weed in there to the middle. Then there's guys that are next level expensive, but also there's a reason they probably are. They're probably providing extra value at something, so on and so forth. So be cautious that way. I mean, to me, regardless of if it's a really expensive South Africa outfitter, it's cheaper than North America elk hunt these days. The average elk hunt in North America is between $20,000 and $35,000 now for a good class elk. So to me, it's like it's donuts to peanuts type deal. You know what I mean? Like, you can go to Africa and spend the same amount of money and have triple the amount of fun that you can here in North America. And I say, sit down, talk to them. Don't go for the best deal. And my next one is have some reasonable expectations. You know what I mean? You're going to be going to a different country. You're going to be, like in South Africa, load shedding. Like, that is the craziest thing ever. You know what I mean? On safari, it's not going to always be the power is going to go out, like all this different stuff. Like, don't have expectations based off of what you see on Instagram and Facebook all the time, because going back to it, there's a few people on Instagram that have been to Africa 3 times and it's been with the same outfitter. To me, those people have no idea what real Africa is really like. If you're going to learn from people that have experienced the good, the bad, and the ugly. You can't just go off of one person's one word, because they could be dealing with the shittiest outfitter, but they think it's great. You know what I mean? Because they haven't experienced what a real great one is, type of deal. So kind of just be careful on who you're listening to and stuff like that. But I just say go to the trade shows, meet all the people. Because, like I said on my Instagram story the other day, you guys, South Africans, African outfitters overall, I think you guys are some of the nicest human beings, and you are actually generally looking out for people when they come over there. You guys created the hospitality in the hunt industry, if you ask me. Like, every outfitter in North America should come over on a safari in Africa and take note, because the way you guys treat people compared to the way North America outfitters treat people is 9-day difference.
I mean, that's awesome, and such great feedback. But so 2 questions for you. First one is, you're coming out to a trade show for your very first time. You're looking to get a reputable outfitter. How many days would you suggest somebody coming out for that will give them the utmost amount of time to have these sort of discussions, to find out a little bit more about their next safari adventure, and take it further? And then my second question will be, is on time period, how long would you suggest your very first safari should be? Or if you're coming back, how long would you recommend going forward to have the utmost, or let's say the best experience possible?
So, trade show wise, if you're going to like Dallas or SCI, the 2 kind of major players in the, like, let's say Africa industry wise, you got to go for at least 2 days, if not the full show. Because one, you're going to spend You can spend one day not talking to anybody, just walking up and down every aisle, looking at all the badass mounts and just seeing it all, soaking it in. You know what I mean? And plus, like, let's say you're at a booth, Dylan, and I want to talk to you, but I pass by 3 times and you're busy. Because that's how it gets, especially on this Friday and Saturday at a trade show. Now, if you really are serious about talking to somebody, I say you show up the first day of the show, because that's the slowest day and that's the best day for you to sit down and have a conversation with somebody. The Friday, Saturday, Sundays, those days are freaking busy. So that's what I say to someone going to a trade show. Minimum of 2 days. Go the first day if you have a game plan of talking to a special outfitter. And then for your first safari, I think 7 days. That our first safari was 7 days. I think it's too short. I think a first safari, because it's your first time, you don't want to rush it. You don't want to, and some people, aren't going to be able to go to Africa every year, twice a year, or every 2 or 3 years. Some people are going to go to Africa every 5 years. Some people are going to probably go to Africa once. So I say, do a 10-day or a 14-day. My best suggestion would be 14 days, especially if you're going to take your family, because then you can hunt for, let's say you hunt for 8 or 9 days, and then you can spend, 3 or 4 days sightseeing, going and looking at different things, experiencing different parts of it, regardless of where you go. So I would say 10 to 14 days, my best bet for a first safari. If you can swing it, do a 14-day, because you get a full experience and you get to enjoy it a lot more. Because I've went on 5-day safaris and it's just like you're freaking going. Like when I went with John X, we were freaking, because we were going to hunt different species, we were driving all over the place, trying to go do the Val Reba, go do the Blue Dyke, go do the Orby. It was kind of like, there wasn't just the chill safari vibe to it. So, I would say plan, 10 to 14 days if you could.
So I've always wondered, and especially myself having now my small company, trying to do as many hunts and do it for the good reason of conservation. But does traveling take away from the experience when you're on safari? Is that something you need to consider when asking these sort of questions? What would your advice be from a traveling perspective? I always say that you've never really experienced. You hunted the Oribi down on the Indian Ocean, back down in Port Alfred. It's a beautiful place, but you wouldn't get that same experience if you weren't chasing those specific species. So, does that take away from the overall experience, or does it add to it?
I don't. I think the traveling adds to the safari. I think it adds, especially, like the Eastern Cape's big for this, because you're traveling so much because you can be in the Eastern Cape and want to go hunt different species, and you might take a 2-day trip to this area. Because I do find a lot of outfitters in the Eastern Cape, especially, kind of do the same thing you're talking about, Dylan, is where you have different outfitters go to different areas or different farms, because that landowner has the best of this, habitat-wise, species-wise, whatever. So you guys kind of move around a bunch. I think it builds to the experience, because, sometimes driving gets really boring. But, man, if you're in Africa for the first time, you're not going to think it's boring. You're going to be like, holy shit, you're looking around, you're in awe, you're taking it all in, And the cool thing about it, like a good PH, as he's driving, he'll be like, oh, this is what this is. These are those mountains. Or he'll kind of give history, throughout the drive and kind of explain things, because that adds a huge value to it, And you get to see so much. Like South Africa has such a, from Northern Cape, Eastern, from the Northern Cape of South Africa, you have like all sorts of different areas that you can see. KwaZulu-Natal, you can Limpopo, you can be all over and see so much different terrain if you're driving. I think it's just one of those things that it adds to the safari. Sure, it takes away some of your time of hunting, but you get to see so much cool stuff.
So with that being said, and we've highlighted, especially in this podcast, how important relationships really are. And from my point of view is that I've seen it time and time again. Carl from John X, you got Jason Stone, you got the guys, Breaside Safaris, that are experiencing and broadening their horizons, going up into North Africa, broadening their perspective on the hunting industry as a whole. So how important, number one, are those relationships that you build back at home for future hunts to come? And is that something that you would consider? Would you consider taking a reputable African outfitter that you've used before back, even if it is in the Eastern Cape, taking them up top to hunt in, say, places like Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Zambia, those places like that?
So that's a good point. So, you got people like Carl, John X, you got Jason Stone, you even have, the Kelly guys that are kind of venturing out into other areas and taking their clients places. And I think that's great. For me personally, I'm not going to go hunt with the same outfitter in 5 different countries because you don't get the same experience that you would if you went with a guy that is from there. Like, obviously, I hunted Zambia with Stone, and he's not from there. Um, but it's kind of like, to me, I think Jason does more of his own stuff in Zambia, and his brother does all the South Africa stuff. So he's kind of like, that's his, primary area. Um, but I'm not going to go do like Ethiopia with him. I'm going to go do Ethiopia with Jason Russos. You know what I mean? There's just different things, and there's no offense to Jason Stone. I'm not like, I love him, but I'm going to go do it with someone that's been pretty much born and raised there. Has experienced the whole thing, and so it's and I understand there's PHs that will go, like, you got Guav Johnson who will go and guide for Mayo Jury and stuff like that. And I would love to hunt with Guav in Cameroon, but I'm going to hunt with Guav. I would love to hunt with Guav in Zimbabwe. You know what I mean? Like, those guys are kind of bouncing around, but that's kind of like their main turf. I think, to me, there's some people that love sticking with the same person because it gets rid of a lot of headache and a lot of guesswork, which is totally fine. To each their own on that. But to me, I'm like, I want to go experience the country with someone that's been there forever type of deal. You know what I mean? Even within South Africa, you get outfitters that will go from Eastern Cape to Limpopo, Northern Cape. It's like there's guys who go all over. Even within South Africa, I want to hunt with guys that are kind of located there. Like guys from KwaZulu-Natal, I want to hunt with them there. Guys from Limpopo, I want to hunt with them there. Eastern Cape, I want to hunt with people like you that are kind of isolated there, like located there. You know what I mean? Because like home base, no one's going to know your home base better than you. And so that's kind of how I look at it.
One of the big questions that I always get asked at these trade shows, and it's something that I never really paid a lot of attention to until I was caught out a couple of years ago up in one of the North countries, Zambia to be exact, where a lot of the hidden costs weren't accounted for. So came the end of the safari, the guys came to pay their bill, and they were slapped with another $15,000 bill at the end of it. Whether it be for airfare or trophy transportation and stuff. So what are the questions that you would suggest people asking? To their outfitter that they've chosen, to make sure that they're not any of those hidden costs. Because even something as small as we offer free transfers once you land in South Africa. What are some of those hidden costs that you would highlight and recommend people to keep asking those sort of questions?
So for me, like if you're going to especially trade shows, because we're kind of on that subject, So let's take it. You go to a trade show, you sit down with you, and when you're talking, what you want to do is say, okay, what's a part of the package? Like especially in South Africa, how there's packages. You say, okay, what's a part of the package? Perfect. Okay, what's not a part of the package? Perfect. Then when you go into like Zambia, Tanzania, and stuff, you got your VAT fees, you got freaking transportation fees. Like you're talking about charter fees. Charter fees are a huge thing. Like in CAR. The charter fee is like $15,000. So that's just $15,000 by itself. That's kind of like an unknown cost to a lot of people. They think you just show up and go hunting. No. But by the time you're hunting CAR, like most people are going to be like kind of through the gamut of Africa by the time they get there. But like just find out what fees are for transportation, like you're saying, pick up at airports, or is there, another small airplane ride that you got to get to, like from Johannesburg to the Eastern Cape or Johannesburg to the Northern Cape or whatever, like, or is someone going to pick you up and add that to the cost? Or are they cutting the cost difference because they're dropping somebody off and picking you up at the same time, type of deal like that. If you and your buddy go, are you going to split it type of deal? Things like that is what I would look for. And then another thing is, especially when you get out of South Africa and you get in these kind of more remote camps, you're going to have a lot of different working people that you might not expect, because you got to have people that are kind of running the camp. You got people, mechanics in camp. Get a list prior to time, if you need to, of how many people to expect to tip, And I think it is mandatory to tip. Like a lot of people don't think it. Like I think it is mandatory if you had a good experience. If you had a shitty experience, that's up to you. But to me, it's, get a list of all the people that are in camp, because, especially like your employees, like the trackers and stuff like that. A tip for them is their entire year. You know what I mean? Like, it is such a big deal to them, and it makes them so excited. So like when I went with my buddy Donnie and hunted with him, and I gave his trackers, two guys in camp working on his trackers and stuff and skinners, and I gave him a tip. He sent me a picture of what they went and bought. One of them bought a fridge, and one of them bought a TV with their tip money. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, it was cool that he sent me the pictures of what they actually bought with their tips. So it's pretty sweet to see that. So yeah, get a list of how many people are going to be in camp. That way you're kind of prepared when you go there as far as tip goes. Like in Zambia, buffalo prices, trophy fees go up when you shoot buffalo. So the first one, let's say the first one's $1,200. Well, the second one's going to be like $800 or whatever. They go up in price because that's government-wise. Tanzania, it's opposite; it goes down. It's kind of crazy how that stuff works. So those are kind of costs that you need to kind of picture ahead of time if you have multiple buffalo on license and stuff like that. And then, yeah, as far as hidden cost goes, I think those are the big ones, the transportation one, especially. And then, if the outfitter does in-house dip and pack, or let's just say this, make sure that, maybe the outfitter start including the dip and pack into some packages for you, or they don't. Make sure what's not in, get it in writing ahead of time. Most outfitters are really good at telling you what's not included because they know they don't want a headache at the end of the trip. Someone like, there's bad ones that will try to squeeze in there because they know they can get it on you. But there's a lot of you guys out there that don't want the headache of dealing with a pissed off client. So you let them know up front. I think it's so much easier for me to say, hey, Dylan, your beer, like this is a weird thing, but some camps don't supply beer. You know what I mean? Like, your beer is an added cost. You got to tell me what you want. You got to pay for that ahead of time. You know what I mean? Or the Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi in Cameroon was an added cost, and we had to pay for that ahead. You know what I mean? Like, things like that. Like, let them know ahead of time. Don't let them know why you're there, because that just kind of will put a bad taste in their mouth. Or at the end of the trip, when it's like you get the bill and it's like, well, what the hell is this for? Like a prime example is in Tajikistan. When we went there, I said, hey, we want to know how many people to tip. In Tajikistan, we were in the middle of BFE, mountains, and there was like 5 people in camp. But when we got the list of how many people there were in camp to tip, there was like 20, and there wasn't 20 people there. Like, on Safari, you can kind of like see how many people are there, and it's like, oh man, I didn't realize that many people were there. Tajikistan, you could tell exactly how many people were there, but they were creating extra jobs for people to get more money type of deal. It was a little bit weird that way. So it's just like, that was kind of like one of those costs that you're like, well, what the hell? So just kind of look at things like that, I would say.
So while we're on the uncertainty of questions and stuff, you briefly mentioned taxidermy. What would you suggest? What would you suggest for you, the first-time hunter coming out to Africa? It must be daunting, spending all this money and not know where to put it on your pieces of memorabilia that you get to take from your safari trip. What would you suggest? Having it done in South Africa, or opposed to dipping and packing, taking it back over to North America and having it done there?
So I've actually changed my perspective on this over like the last 2 years. I used to think, oh no, don't get it done in Africa, because we've had stuff done in Africa, but we had it done in Africa freaking like 14 years ago. So the quality is a little bit different. Sorry, I keep knocking my light over. Anyways, so the difference is, so like nowadays, I think the taxidermy quality has went up significantly in South Africa. But so one thing is look at the guys at Splitting Image. They've done some great videos explaining the cost of things, so on and so forth. And I think anyone, if they have any kind of thoughts of like, well, is it cheaper to have it done here in America or done in Africa? Go look at the Splitting Image stuff. They've done some great videos. You've done some podcasts with them. Like, look at the stuff that they've produced, because they break it down and explain to you really well. Now, there's some things I think you should have done in America, certain species. But other than that, I think it's kind of based on where you're at and what you're looking for. You know what I mean? And because like I could break down the cost and it could be rough ballpark figures, but like I said, like they went through and they broke down the cost of, okay, here's a crate shipment of shoulder mounts compared to dip and pack. And then I think it's just kind of to each their own. You know what I mean? Now, if you're not going to come back to America or wherever you are and go to a respectable taxidermist and get it done here in America, get it done in Africa. Because the guys in Africa are going to know what those species look like more than your cousin that does white-tailed deer out of his garage for a case of beer. You know what I mean? Like, to me, it's if you got a guy in America that does tremendous Africa stuff, he's probably been there a couple times, use him. But if you don't, use the people use Split and Image, like for a great example. Use them because they're from Africa. They've done tons and tons of it. It's like, like again, it goes back to your cousin doing whitetail in his garage for beer. He's done a lot of whitetail, but he's never done a Cape Buffalo or a kudu. You know what I mean? You got to be able to reinvent that memory. And to me, taxidermy is not something that you want to skimp on, especially if you're doing shoulder mounts or pedestal mounts or life size. You do not want to skimp on the work because then when you get that animal back, it doesn't bring back the memories as good if it comes back as a poor quality mount.
So, Mckenzie, with the show season done, we've touched on it. Are you going to heading down to any of the shows? Have you got any shows lined up for 2024?
Nashville SCI. That's my plan, is to get down there for that one.
Well, we'll definitely see you in Nashville. We must definitely link up and have a couple of beers and chat hunting. I'll be looking forward to that one. So, with that being said, any safaris planned for the upcoming season? Have you got anything booked, or if not this year, maybe next year?
Man, should have been out there in a couple of weeks, but I just can't get out there. I was gonna do some kudu hunting. My next trip would probably be KwaZulu-Natal area. Gonna do red diker and stuff. I'm gonna do civet and serval. Try to do those as well because I haven't done those yet. Like I said, man, I'm a guy that I could go and hunt kudu. I could come to Africa and hunt kudu every year, so it's not like I'm not doing the same species over and over. I would do the same species over and over. So yeah, I think the first trip would be coming over there doing the red diker, civet, serval, stuff like that, some smaller critters like that, and then just kind of play by ear and see. We need to get together and do something. I know that for sure.
So, Mckenzie, once again, it's been an absolute honor, but really, your infectious and your passion for Africa really it transcends, and I can't tell you how much and how grateful we really are for that to happen, because you just shed such a positive light on the South African industry. With that being said, Sim Safaris, what is it all about? Is it still running? Is it operating as a separate entity? Where can people find you? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, for sure. So my Sim Safari page, and it kind of goes back to your question earlier about hunting industry wise. I have like my Sim Safaris page is just an information website. You don't got to pay for anything. You get on there and you find quality outfitters that I've been with. And like the YouTube video that I dropped today, it just says, if you go to my Safari help link that's on my site and fill out 5 questions, I will email you back with the answers to those 5 questions tailored to what you're wanting. So the questions are, what species are you wanting to hunt? When can you be gone from home? How many days can you be gone? And are you bow or rifle specific? And then the last one's if you need a travel agent or not. So I would create an email back to you answering all those, kind of saying, okay, go with Dylan if you want to do the Orby, like certain species. Because some people are going to be like, well, I want to do X, Y, and Z. Well, you can't really do X, Y, and Z on every safari. You got to pick and choose where you're going to be, because you could be wanting to do a red diker, but then also you want to do stuff in the Northern Cape. You can't do that in one safari, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. So it's just kind of, I want to help people learn that there's certain safaris that aren't feasible unless you have X amount of days and can travel. But I want to just give people like a stepping stones to get their first safari booked or their next safari booked by saying, okay, here's the 6 outfitters I would recommend for kudu. Okay, here's the 6 outfitters I would recommend for doing the Orby hunt type of deal. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I go about it. And I'll be doing a lot more blog posts and email stuff through my Sim Safari link for anyone that wants to just sign up for my emails and stuff and then follow me on Instagram. That's about it.
So I'll definitely be tagging as much as I possibly can down below. But if people are listening to this on the road or wherever it may be, where can they find you? What are some of the handles that they can use to contact you, or even just get into contact with you? Maybe it be for references from John X or whoever you've hunted with. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so my YouTube's just Mckenzie Sims, and then my Instagram is just Mckenzie Sims, but it has Mckenzie, the 2 underslashes Sims. That's how you find me on there, and just my name, and then Sims Safaris is simple. It's SIMS Safaris. Just kind of like the snowboards and stuff like that. Video game Sims.
Mckenzie, thank you so much for taking out the time to join me on this podcast. First one for 2024. I'm pretty pumped up about it. What an episode to kick off the new season. It's been epic. Thank you so much once again. And just on behalf of myself, and I'm sure so many hunters out in Africa, thank you so much for shedding a positive light on our African industry. And just sharing your passion with us. It's just really it's transcended to so many different camps, and I'm really, really looking forward to meeting up in Nashville and having a couple of toots. But yeah, thanks so much, Mckenzie. Have a wonderful day, and hopefully you get that coyote.
Sounds great, man. I appreciate it. Thanks, Dylan. Really enjoyed this, man.